Jeff Ross here. Before we get to our lesson, let me just go over what's been happening in recent weeks. Donald Trump has been reelected as president, and not to a consecutive term. He has the honor of being the second non-consecutive serving president, second only to Grover Cleveland, who served from 1885 to 1889 and 1893 to 1897. And he's hit the ground running with his appointments, including Elon Musk as the secretary to the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which has stirred up a lot of controversy from the start. I mean, like I said, he's not wasting any time, and he's ticking off all the usual suspects. He is in it for real, and I'm sure the controversy is going to continue, and he's wasting no time. He knows he's a lame duck. He's just going to finish this one last term, and he doesn't care. And, he wants to get actually most of it done within the first 2 years before the midterm elections. And we'll see how this all pans out. In fact, he probably wants to use DOGE and what they discover as an issue for the midterm elections. And the DOGE, by the way, is only going to be in existence for 2 years. It's a temporary office. But today's discussion and lesson is about another historical controversial leader, Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill, the wartime Prime Minister of Great Britain in World War II, born on November 30th, 1874, the son of Lord Randolph Churchill and American-born Jeanette Jerome. He pretty much grew up in an aristocratic home, and his education was basically geared to preparing him for military service. And he was commissioned as a lieutenant in 1895 in the Army, and he would see action in places like Sudan, which was the Mahdist War, in which a figure by the name of Mohammed Ahmad bin Abdullah claimed to be the Mahdi, or guided one, and his faction believed that it was the end of the world was coming, and he was the chosen one to bring about a new age, but nothing ever came of that. And Lieutenant Churchill would also see action in British India as well as in South Africa with the Boer War, in which he was taken prisoner by the Boers and would escape by hopping on trains hobo style and hiding in a mine until he eventually made it to what was Portuguese East Africa at the time, modern-day Mozambique. He served in the Parliament from 1901 to 1904 as a conservative, and then he was in the Liberal Party from 1904 to 1924. In 1908, he would marry Clementine Hosier, and they would have 5 children. Now, during World War I, he was appointed in 1911 as First Lord of the Admiralty and would serve into World War I, and he was sort of, at the time, made the infamous decision to plan and execute the landing at Gallipoli, Turkey, which was a disaster. Thousands of British troops were killed, and he was forced to step down as Lord of the Admiralty and would do a stint on the Western Front in Belgium as commander of the 6th Battalion Royal Scots Fusiliers, basically a frontline unit in the trenches, kind of like serving penance. After the war, he was still a member of parliament during that whole time and continued as such. And in the early 20s after the war, he would serve as Secretary of State for the colonies, and he helped draw up the borders of the Arab Mideastern countries of today, including, well, Israel today. That was Palestine back then, and including other countries like Iraq, which many historians today say was a mistake. And basically, the British had drawn up the borders so that they would get the oil and the French would get all the sand. And he also helped install King Abdullah I in what was then Transjordan and King Faisal I in Iraq. And in 1924, he rejoined the Conservative Party, serving as Chancellor of the Exchequer until 1929. That's basically in charge of the Treasury for the country. And when Labor would be in charge from 1921 to 1931, and then in 1933, well, again, he was still serving in Parliament. When Hitler took over Germany, after the Conservatives had come back in 1931, but in 1933, he started warning about Hitler. When he rose to power in Germany, he knew this guy was going to be trouble. And he opposed Neville Chamberlain's appeasement deal with Hitler in 1938, which gave Hitler the Sudetenland in western Czechoslovakia, which was ethnically German and German-speaking, ceded that land over to Germany, hoping that Hitler would behave better. But that was not to be. In 1939, September, he invaded Poland, and Britain and France declared war against them. And however, he was appointed. Churchill would serve again as Lord of the Admiralty, and what was known as the sit-down war on land, where they were basically mobilizing the forces and getting ready to fight and planning how they were going to go about it. However, as Lord of the Admiralty, he was in charge of the Navy forces. There was no sit-down war there. The U-boats were active, and, he wasted no time trying to prosecute the war there. And he would eventually, again, because he opposed appeasement, a faction of the Conservative Party known as the Young Tory Rebels helped, along with some help from the Labour Party, the opposition, then Clement Attlee, helped bring him to power. In fact, there's a book that goes into great detail about it by Lynn Olson called Troublesome Young Men, the Rebels Who Brought Churchill to Power and Helped Save England. One of those young Tory rebels included Major Ronald Cartland, who, while in Cassel, France, was helping to secure the escape route to Dunkirk. He was killed by a German sniper and became the first member of Parliament to be killed in action in World War II. And Churchill's overall strategy was to surround Germany, to come at them peripherally through Norway and through Italy. He preferred to do that instead of going straight across the Channel to Normandy. However, when they faced strong German resistance in Italy, especially at places like Anzio and Monte Cassino, he had a change of heart and then started planning Operation Overlord, helping Eisenhower do that. And eventually the war was won. However, he was very wary of Joseph Stalin and didn't like the Yalta deal at all, but which basically gave Eastern Europe to the Soviet Union and led to the Cold War. And he preferred to take a harder stand with Stalin. However, by the Yalta Conference of the Big Three, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he was just not in good shape at all. And he had also been more friendly to Stalin, while, again, Churchill was kind of wary of him, rightfully so. Then after the war in 1945, he was voted out of office and replaced by Clement Attlee of the Labor Party. Churchill would serve as leader of the opposition from 1945 to 1951. He would be reelected as prime minister in 1951 to 1955. Now, while as opposition leader in 1946, while visiting America on March 5th, 1946, at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, he gave what was known as his famous Iron Curtain speech, in which he basically described the dividing line between Eastern and Western Europe, from the Baltics down to the Balkans. And that was one of his more famous speeches post-World War II. And again, he served another stint as prime minister from 1951 to 1955, but had to step down for health reasons. He continued officially as a member of Parliament. However, he didn't spend much time at the House of Commons, and he would eventually step down as a member of Parliament in 1964. And he would, in the following year, he would die of a stroke on January 24th of 1965. And he was also known as a writer, in which he won a Nobel Prize for Literature in 1953, as well as a historian and artist and an amateur bricklayer. He was also known for some famous biting quotes. One is apocryphal, in which Lady Astor approached him and told him, "If you were my husband, I'd put poison in your coffee." And to which he replied, "If you were my wife, I'd drink it." And on another exchange, another lady confronted him saying, "You're drunk." To which he replied, "And you, madam, are ugly, but tomorrow I'll be sober, and you'll still be ugly." Well, that's it for my talk on Winston Churchill. You have a wonderful day.